All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Vegetation Management Project Grant Workshop. We'll give everybody just a few minutes to come into here, although I see quite a few participants coming on board right now. And while we have people coming online, we have a special message from our Spanish interpreters that are going to be doing live interpretation. Thank you very much. And for all of you attending tonight, please make sure down at the bottom right hand of your screen, you have a choice there of interpretation of English or Spanish. You will need to choose English if you want English speaking, or Spanish if you want Spanish speaking. Okay. And with that, we'll go ahead and start the workshop. Just a few, oops, there we go. Just a few reminders and the procedures about the workshop. First of all, my name is Jane Elias. I work with the County of Sonoma and Energy and Sustainability Division, and currently also with the County Administrator's Office, and have been working on the vegetation management grant through the documents and what have you, along with a number of people that are going to be on this workshop tonight. For the workshop, we have disabled the chat feature. What we would like when we get to the Q&A feature is that to please type in your questions in that Q&A box, and we will be addressing them through that. For those of you that are calling in by phone, please email your questions to vegmanagement@sonoma-county.org and during the workshop, and we will try and get to those questions as well. If those questions come in afterwards, don't fret. We will be addressing all of the questions and giving you answers hopefully throughout tonight, but all of your questions will be posted on the Grant Management Workshop site, and along with the answers, and as well as the session tonight is being recorded. So shortly after, this will be available on the YouTube channel, both the Spanish and the English versions. So again, all questions pertaining to the grant from tonight will be posted on the grant website along with answers, so all potential applicants have access to them. So next we're going to go and talk about the agenda. We're going to get an introduction from our panelists that we have tonight. And then really this is the opportunity for you to ask questions regarding the grant. And hopefully, like I said, we'll have the answers for you tonight. If we don't, just note that it may take a day or so to get some of those answers, but they will be up on the website. So, introduction to panelists. We have Dr. Carol Hart. She is the Interim General Manager for the Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. We've got Steve Masserchak, the Interim Fire Marshal for the County of Sonoma. Chief Ben Nichols, the Santa Rosa Division Chief for CAL FIRE. Robert Aguero, Senior Environmental Specialist for the County of Sonoma. And Lisa McKaylee, President and CEO of Pepperwood Preserve. And Lisa is here with us tonight as a consultant representing the County of Sonoma and the Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. So I will go ahead and leave it for Carol to go ahead and present. And in addition to the presenters that we have listed here, we have a few other county staff available that might be able to jump in and answer some questions if needed.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone. thank you so much for taking the time to attend this Vegetation Management Project Grant Program Q&A session. Before we get into answering your questions, I just want to give an overview of the program and why we're here today. As I'm sure most of you know, or you wouldn't be here, the County of Sonoma is directing $2 to $4 million to near-term vegetation management activities in high-risk areas and near key ecosystems in Sonoma County. The funding for the program is coming from a settlement that the county entered into with Pacific Gas and Electric as a result of the 2017 Nuns Fire. However, projects do not need to be in the Nuns Fire area and can be anywhere in Sonoma County. The goal of this program is to support community resiliency and, most importantly, to increase wildfire prevention. In order to do as much as we can before the 2021 wildfire season, we are providing funding to entities that are eligible to apply. These include nonprofit organizations, community groups and organizations, local fire districts, communities with community wildfire protection plans, resource conservation districts, licensed foresters, technical advisors, and schools. As you'll hear in a few minutes, we have advice for you and information on what is required with regard to CEQA. We've gotten a lot of questions about that and we'll do our best to respond, but I just have to tell you that the county is not in a position to provide legal advice on your project CEQA compliance. We will be providing you with some links and resources on advisors and other information on how to make sure your project complies with CEQA. But before we can fund the project, you must show that you have complied with CEQA as an exemption or complying with other requirements of CEQA, and we'll be discussing that more today. So we have all the grant materials listed on Ag Plus Open Space District's website. We've listed there, and you'll see in the lower right corner, you can click on the Veg Management tab. Within the documents that are there, we've listed the focus areas for the projects, including in that are regions of the county, but that is in no way exclusive. This is a full Sonoma County program. The types of projects are also listed on the website, and you can see that on page 2. But I think the most important thing is to think about is what the award criteria is going to be, which is going to be the evaluation group will be county department heads from the resource agencies here at the county. And the number one thing we're going to be looking at is, does the proposal have the potential to reduce fire risk in advance of the 2021 and 2022 fire seasons? And along with that, of course, the requirement that your project be shovel ready. You'll learn more about what that means as we make our presentations here today, but in essence, it's that you have a plan, that you've complied with CEQA or shown that your project is exempt from CEQA. And the other criteria that we will be using in considering your projects is whether it is located in or in proximity to priority project regions that are listed within those forms, that you engage in priority project activities, which we've listed. And then there are other criteria, but those are the top criteria. So please look at all of the documents, print them out, and please try to respond as closely as you can to what we've requested. You have until May 16th at 5 p.m. to submit your application. And I'm sorry about the short time frame, but the whole point here is to try to get this money out to you so you can do your project in a way that's going to help prevent fire in this coming fire season. We provided you with a website and a phone number to call if you have any additional questions. And obviously, please ask all of your questions as much as you can today. And we very much look forward to answering your questions as best we were able today. So thanks for taking the time. And more than that, thanks so much for caring enough about your county, your own property, and your neighbor's property to address fire and climate resiliency here in Sonoma County. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Jane to introduce the next panelist.
Thank you, Carol. So the next panelist is Steve Masserchak. He's the interim fire marshal for the County of Sonoma. Steve?
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Masserchak. I'm the interim fire marshal for the county of Sonoma. I was being brought in as a resource for the allocation of helping to review the applications that are submitted. I'll be the connection between your community and the local fire district in efforts to support the projects you're submitting within your application and be able to provide feedback based on the assessments we do in the application process. So I'm here for any questions that may come up about your project areas, what you're submitting within your applications, what your intent is. And then I'm also the nexus between the fire districts to help support your community-based projects or your specific needs. So thank you very much for this opportunity to participate.
Great, thank you, Steve. And if possible, if you could type in maybe your contact information in the Q&A so that participants have know your email or know how to get a hold of you. So next we've got Chief Ben Nichols. He's CAL FIRE's Santa Rosa Division Chief. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Jane and Manager Hart. Wanted to reach out to the community here and let you know that I'm very excited about this opportunity that's being provided by the county and the Board of Supervisors in bringing this critical work to the county. So I'm in part of the group here to make sure that the projects that are undertaken are indeed aiding in that defense from the wildfire events that we are experiencing over the last several years and continue to experience as we go forward. And I'm looking forward to working with the group and the grantees and bringing these critical projects forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief Nichols. And Robert Aguero, Senior Environmental Specialist with County of Sonoma and Permit Sonoma.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Good evening, everyone. Robert Guerrero, environmental specialist and licensed forester with Permit Sonoma. So I don't have any slides, but I will be giving just like a brief presentation right now on CEQA. I'll make sure my contact information gets forwarded to this group. So that way, if anyone has any additional questions, I'm happy to answer those. So since county funds are going to be used to fund projects, CEQA has to happen. All projects that are funded will require some level of CEQA analysis, either via an exemption or a higher level of analysis. So the intent of this is to make sure that public funds aren't being used to fund projects that could have negative environmental impacts that can't be mitigated or don't have that high level of analysis that maybe an EIR would have. So the basic process for CEQA is this. The first step is to see if your project can fit into what's called a categorical exemption. And the CEQA guidelines have a list of categories that projects can fall under. And if your project falls in one of these categories, then it is likely that you don't need to do significant CEQA analysis. So some examples of categorical exemptions include what are called minor alterations to land. And that includes fuel management activities in the defensible space around structures. Another example of exemptions includes projects that maintain existing facilities. For example, the maintenance of an existing fuel break. Another type of exemption include maintenance projects. I know our county public works department has used that particular exemption for hazardous tree removal in the northwest part of the county along the road right of way. So within the guidelines, there's a list of categorical exemptions. If you type in CEQA guidelines 2021, it's a free PDF online that anyone can access. And so then the next step, if your project doesn't fit into an exemption, then a higher level document is going to be required. So either a negative declaration, a mitigated negative declaration, or an environmental impact report are required. And ultimately, if this is the route that a project is taking, then I would say a consultant is highly recommended to aid you in this process if you haven't been through it before. There's also the option to utilize the existing California Vegetation Treatment Program, EIR. So that's what's called a programmatic EIR. And basically all the CEQA analysis has been done for those. And you basically you can what's called tier off. So you use the existing mitigations and project analyses that have been done in that document to comply with CEQA. And so again, with that, I would also highly recommend hiring a consultant to aid in that process. That document can be found on the Board of Forestry's website, which I believe I think I can send a link to Jane, and then would that just be put in the Q&A probably, or however we're forwarding information. But that is my brief overview of CEQA. I think the Q&A session will probably lend itself to more discussion about that, and I can answer any questions at that point as well.
Great, thank you, Robert. Good information, and looking forward to having some questions related to that. And lastly, we've got Dr. Lisa McHaley, President and CEO of Pepperwood Preserve, who's working as a consultant with us on this grant workshop. Lisa?
Hey, thanks for having me. So we can go to the next slide. My name is Lisa. I am based at the Pepperwood Foundation, and we own and operate a research, reserve, and educational center on 3,200 acres of stewarded natural lands. We work very closely with CAL FIRE and have a vegetation management program and plan that we share with folks. Tonight, I'm wearing the hat of really representing a broad community of NGOs and community associations and agencies who have been partnering to grow the resources, particularly for private landowners and community groups. So we just wanted to have a chance to let people know of some of these new tools and products that are out there to help you accelerate your planning process and get to the end of the kind of project that you need to do. Next. So the first is a new product that has just been released with UC Extension, and the partners you can see on the upper right-hand side is the Wildfire FuelMapper.org tool. And if you go to the Learn About Fuel Treatments tab there, there's what we call a story map that really explains what are the issues with our forests, what are the different approaches you can take to do fuel treatments, and then there's actually a step-by-step guide of how you can move through the development of the plan. So we just wanted to share that as a resource for you to sort of see what UC Extension and the other folks who do this kind of work recommend in terms of a planning process, and what are the resources out there for you to move forward with your plan. Next. The other thing that's helpful, if you go to the resources and data page, these all have drop-down menus that show you the data you can use. In particular, there are maps there that you can use to submit as part of your project submission. There's a list of all different kinds of specialists you might wish to consult to sign off on your project and advise on both what is the appropriate treatment for your area, how do you deal with CEQA, et cetera. And there's also a funding tab there. So, this funding has a very specific short-term goal of trying to accelerate those projects that have been in the pipeline and haven't been able to be funded because of shortage of resources. But there are a lot of other funding sources out there that might be also a good fit for your project. And those will be updated because there really are a lot more resources that will be released over the course of the next 12 months from CAL FIRE and other sources. And finally, there's just a lot of learning tools that people can access. Next. I also just want to point out that the Sonoma County Forest Conservation Working Group is a collaborative, again, of multiple individuals and organizations, including Sonoma Land Trust, Ag and Open Space, Pepperwood, Audubon Canyon Ranch, really a lot of the leaders in this work. And we're making our knowledge and practices available. Again, there's some pretty detailed guidance on how to move forward with developing a plan based on what the size of your property is and what the issues are that you might be looking at. Next. And finally, there is a source of funding specifically for private landowners that could include individuals who might not be eligible for this pot of funding, now available through the North Bay Forest Improvement Program, which is sponsored by Rebuild North Bay and is really a collaboration of the different resource conservation districts in the area. And this program can provide match funding for a project that you have ready to go, And if you're in a disadvantaged community, there is technical assistance that you can access via this program. So I'm available tonight to answer any more technical questions about how to actually do the projects. And we will be supporting the county in helping to roll out the different elements of this landscape level vegetation management program. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And all the so that what I want to do is open this up for questions. Again, if you are on Zoom, you can go ahead and type in your question in the Q&A feature. And then myself and Amy Ricard will be looking at those questions and we'll be reading those out aloud. Also, if you are on the webinar tonight via telephone, you can type in your question to the vegmanagement@sonoma-county.org email, and we'll try and get to those as well. So let me go ahead and bring up Q&A and we'll see. We've got first question here. Sorry about the slideshow there. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. Is there anything definitive you can share about whether fire fuel reduction away from structures is exempt? Have been scouring the resources online, but so tough to know how legit it is to define our work as exempt. But of course, we'd love to be able to. The work is essentially non-native flammable plants removal, limbing trees, some tree removal, and chipping and spreading.
I'll take that one. So I would say within the list of CEQA exemptions, the class 4 minor alterations to land for fuel management within 100 feet of structures, that sounds like it may apply. I think, did I hear that right? Is it within the defensible space? But that being said, so if it can fit in that exemption, then yes. I mean, I would say that that could probably be considered exempt. Again, I can't make a recommendation or a definitive answer on a project without reading a full project description. But if your project can fit into one of these exemptions, definitely try to go for it. One thing I would say about categorical exemptions, you can't mitigate impacts. So if you're, for example, so say there's the potential for, I don't know, like endangered species in your project area, you can't mitigate, you have to fully avoid any of those kind of impacts. And so as long as you can fit into that box and make sure that you can avoid any potential negative impacts, then if you try to fit your project into the exemption as much as you can.
Jane, could I just make a couple comments too?
Sure.
So we haven't mentioned yet, but this funding source, this grant program, was initially authorized by the board a little over a month ago. So we're sort of in this with you. What I'm really hoping is that if you're on the border of should I submit or not, have I satisfied CEQA, do I have an exemption, we really want you to submit, because what we want to do is be in touch with you, because even if you can't satisfy things this round because it's all happening so quickly and you weren't prepared, we are going to be in touch with you. The county is going to be having a manager that is designated to work with you, the community, on veg management during the coming period of how, not sure, but at least for next year. So the point I'm making is submit your application, err on the side of submitting. So for that last person, I really would like to see that application, because it sounds like there's a good chance it might be exempt.
All right, thank you. And next one, if a project is exempt with a non-governmental project proponent, still need to find a lead agency to file the NOE, or will Ag and Open Space file that or not require an NOE?
My understanding, and Carol, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the county will be taking the lead agency role for CEQA for these funds. So if a non-governmental agency has a project that is exempt, then the county would be who files the notice of exemption.
Right, but keeping in mind that you can't expect that the county will be doing CEQA for you. So, you know, if you file and the exemption is not a valid one, then you'll probably hear back from us that, you know, we want to work with you to try to figure out how to either move forward with CEQA compliance or perfect the exemption. But really the most important thing that I've heard is you really need to have a consultant. You need to look at the website that Lisa gave you rather than go forward without having that expertise. There's a list of people that can help you that are advisors that are experts in this area. Even better, your local RCD. And I see that Valerie Quinto is on the Q&A from Sonoma RCD. The RCDs are absolutely essential allies for you in helping you figure out these projects.
Thank you. All right, and from Jeff Peters, Supervisor Gore asked us to prepare an application for critical area prior to your program announcement. We are nearly ready to submit. You say you want, hold on, one moment. The chat feature just, Jeff, I just lost your question. Amy, do you see?
I see it, Jane. It's in the answered questions.
Oh, you already answered.
Because
Okay.
no, because you're answering it live right now, or you're reading it. So why don't, yeah, you'll have to read the question from answered, and then we'll answer it live.
Right, and I did provide somewhat of an answer, but certainly the panelists might want to provide more information.
Okay, all right. So that was, yet the areas listed in B1F are not those with the highest fire return rates, nor the adjacent key infrastructure. For example, the Geysers area has one of the highest fire return rates of anywhere in Sonoma County and is immediately adjacent to the United States' largest geothermal electric generating facility, but isn't listed. So what are the real priorities, and are those not in the listed areas disadvantage?
So you can see I provided a response to that the areas listed, we went through a series of hearings with experts. The areas that are listed were identified by those experts, those local experts, and we also had statewide experts, but they're in no way meant to be exclusive. And frankly, there's other funding sources. Let's just talk about Fitch Mountain, for example, not being identified. We've heard some feedback on that. Areas that are public lands are often eligible for other funding. And maybe many of you heard about the $500 million that the governor made available. That's going to be, that program is running through the California Coastal Conservancy. I think that the time is closed now for applying to that, but that's really aimed at public lands. So to some extent, if you see us not listing those areas, it could be because there's other funding sources.
And Jane, this is Amy. I just wanted to clarify. Jeff had another question, which is the one that you were starting to read, that says Supervisor Gore asked us to prepare an application for a critical area prior to your program announcement. We are nearly ready to submit it. You say you want, quote, measurable and relevant outcomes ahead of the 2021 fire season, but awards will not be announced until May 25th when we are already in fire season. Can you support rolling reviews of submitted applications as they arrive so that those that clearly qualify may receive notification earlier?
Unfortunately, I really don't see how that's going to be possible, because I'm sure that we're going to get many more applications and requests for funding that we have. And without seeing all of the applications, you know, there's really no way to determine which is the most, which qualifies at the level that would address fire risk. You know, maybe the Chief Nichols or Steve, you could respond to the issue regarding fire season and how useful will this be, assuming the awards don't go out till the end of May?
So the conversation was begun a while ago, and the reflex time is we're here now. So at the end of the day, to Carol's point, there's going to be a lot of interest in pursuing these projects, and so we want to make sure that the finite amount of resources that are available to bring effective treatments here to the county are applied as equitably as we can make happen. And to follow up on the geysers steam field question, the communities listed in section F of the grant requirements were communities noted at risk with a population base that was at greatest risk. So while the steam field definitely has a high fire return rate interval, its proximity away from inhabited areas, as we take on these critical projects, we have to address those areas closer to life and property that's at risk from these major fire events.
Great, thank you. And Amy, do we have, I see we have a couple of phone-in listeners. Do we have any emails coming in at all to the Veg Management email box?
We had one question from Claire, but she also put it in the Q&A and we answered it. So I think we're all right.
Great, thank you. All right, so the question from Cindy, are media, TV and radio education projects considered?
I guess I could answer that. I mean, education projects are considered, it's a little vague. You know, it doesn't sound like it's an exact fit, but you know, I'm not seeing that. I mean, Jane, what is your impression?
Well, it listed in some of the criteria, there is consideration for marketing and outreach education types of programs. So I think, you know, if you have something, maybe a little bit further detail afterwards, but, you know, it is one of those options that's listed and is eligible.
Jane, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Next question. We have a couple of hands raised. Follow up, I think, from Cindy. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And Cindy, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know how I hit that. Didn't mean to.
Go ahead. Cindy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I did not mean to hit that. Apologies.
Oh, okay. All right. And then let's see, we'll go ahead and next question we have. So the website link for this grant program and application date. So the website link is on the email slides. We'll also get it into the Q&A, and the application date, the deadline is Sunday, May 16th at 5 p.m. Another question, how would our neighborhood be able to get funding to clean up Annandale State Park or on the Schultz Road, Kenwood side?
I think Steve or Ben might want to answer that.
So when it comes to treating on property that's not your own, there has to be permission from the landowner that owns that land. So in this case, it would be State Parks. I know that State Parks has projects in the works for Annandale through the Sonoma Valley Wildlands Collaborative. So it would be a point to reach out to State Parks to entertain with them your idea and or your plan, and then Schultz Road same idea, reaching out to that landowner, talking about a project and then bringing that forward. And unfortunately, with the timeline that you're looking at, I'm not sure that that's super optimistic. But to the point earlier about the concern about coming into fire season, this problem is not a one fire season problem. This is not a 2021 problem. This is something that is a long road ahead of us. And so we have to make sure that we put our head down and look on the horizon, not what's right in front of us, because at the end of the day, it's going to take a concerted effort as a group to get to where we need to get at the end of the game.
Right. I will also say that with regard to the conservancy funding, the coastal conservancy funding that I just referenced, the Water Agency and Sonoma County Regional Parks have both put in an application for that funding pool for Spring Lake. So the local agencies are doing what they can. And I do think that State Parks is working more with CAL FIRE in Sacramento on a broader state parks proposals.
Okay. A question from Astrid Meyer. I live in a neighborhood referred to as Wilshire Heights off Reberly Road, which burned in the Tubbs fire. About 45 or so of the properties in our larger neighborhood are part of a nonprofit water company called the Wilshire Heights Mutual Water Company. As a nonprofit, I understand that the Wilshire Heights Water Company is eligible to apply for a grant, but I'm unsure what the scope of the area that we, as members of the water company, could be seeking grant funding for. For example, could we propose a project or projects to address vegetation issues on properties owned by members of our water company only, or could we seek funds to address vegetation issues in the larger neighborhood? For example, properties not part of the water company. Do we need to get buy-in from all the individual property owners first to propose a project that includes mitigation or vegetation issues on their properties? So there's a lot of questions there. So first of all, as a nonprofit, the Wilshire Heights Water Company, are they eligible to apply for the grant? Yes, but unsure what the scope of area would be. Can they only propose a project for just the water company members, or could they enlarge that scope to address vegetation issues on properties owned outside of that?
Well, I mean, I have to say, yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that the entity, the water district, can apply, that they certainly could apply to the area that they have an agreement with. So they would be the entity. I don't see any reason personally why they couldn't apply to a broader area of both the properties that are part of the water district. However, they cannot apply for a project on areas that they don't have permission. I know Chief Nichols that and Steve, I always will just call you Steve, because that there are designated areas of inspection now in the county, and I don't know if that's one of them, but maybe you could address that.
So I could speak to the extent of the 13A inspection program, the enforcement program that's going to be starting and taking underway in the, I think it's about May 17th is when the local fire districts who participate in our 13A vegetation enforcement program will start. I believe that if the Wilshire Water District has areas outside of their district that they would like to include, I know the local fire district, Sonoma County Fire District, is heavily involved within all their community. And so it may be an opportunity to reach out to them, let them know what your intent is and where you feel there is a need, or consult with them on where they also believe there is a need. And that will aid in the participation of the community members outside of their district boundaries for the water district. But I think it's a good idea to work collaboratively within the Wilshire area. I do know it's a small community, but it has a lot of parcels. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done in those specific areas. And Cindy Foreman with the Sonoma County Fire District, she's a deputy chief fire marshal within the district, can aid in those conversations and identify the parcels that need the additional help through the 13A enforcement program which may help you secure the additional funding you need through this grant program.
I might just also let the questioner know that if they are interested, there is a grassroots effort in the Mark West Watershed to try to sort of scale up a treatment plan that would include your community. So if you'd like to learn more about that effort of being part of something larger, it's not necessarily going to help for this particular opportunity, but in terms of planning and joining a larger effort, there could be that opportunity if you have that interest, and I'd be happy to connect you.
Thank you. The next question from Dave. If we conclude that our project fits within a CEQA categorical exemption, who needs to sign off on that? And does sign off need to happen before May 16th?
My understanding, and Carol, again, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that the CEQA exemption would need to be signed off on prior to May 16th. I think the order of operations would be you submit your application, your project is selected for funding, and then at that point, CEQA would be complied with when the county would file an NOE for your project after that point.
That's correct. That's the game plan.
Okay, thank you. And question from Lisa. Regarding the silver tagged dead trees that remain along the roadways, would this be considered for funding?
I'd go to our fire experts on that.
I don't know if I necessarily would know the answer to it. I'm sure if there's trees that are been tagged and need for tree removal and they may pose a hazard to any of the private or public roads that could cut off evacuation routes, I think they would be prioritized for removal if the grant program funds that dollar value.
Ultimately, there's a modification to the landscape, and so there's a CEQA component to that. Maybe Robert can weigh in more, but there is the interest in removing those dead trees. The silver tags were part of a endeavor after the Tubbs fire to determine which trees would actually come back versus being completely voided of their vegetation and then subsequently growing back. So it brings you back to the original conversation about whose property they're on, getting permission from that landowner, and then going through the CEQA process to make sure that while they're dead trees to us, they can also be habitat and next to waterways. And again, Robert's probably better to speak to the nuances of that.
Yeah, I would say it all depends on the scope and the level of impact of the project. I'm not familiar with these trees, so I can't speak precisely to it. But yeah, it just really depends on the scope, where they're at, what potential impacts are out there.
Okay, and a follow-up from Claire's question earlier. Thank you so much for that answer. Specifically referencing the not within 100 feet of structures. So is that something somebody can clarify?
I hate to sound like a squeaky wheel or a broken record, but again, it would depend on the project. You know, I know CAL FIRE has used some categorical exemptions to do shaded fuel breaks. You know, if it can fit within one of these exemptions and it's not impacting resources in any way, there is a chance. So I have my CEQA guidelines pulled up, and so there is a list of exceptions. And when I keep talking about like fitting in the box, this is an example of things fitting in the box. So within CEQA, if your exemption can not impact, if it doesn't impact historical resources, it doesn't impact scenic highways, if there isn't a significant impact on mapped environmental resources. So for example, California Department of Fish and Wildlife has a map of endangered species across the state where they've been known to occur. we at the county have our riparian corridors. That is a mapped environmental resource, for example, that we would want to make sure that your project is not negatively impacting, that you're able to avoid impacts in that area. So that is, if you pulled up that CEQA PDF, it's on page 288. It's section 15300.2 in CEQA, and I'll make sure that gets put in the chat or somewhere that gets linked out. But again, if your project can fit within the confines of the exemptions that are described in CEQA, then there is a chance that it is exempt from CEQA.
We've listed all the exemptions on the website. We have a whole list of Article 19 categorical exemptions, and 15300.2 is listed. So please go to the website under the FAQs, I believe, Amy, and you'll find that document.
Yeah, I'll just clarify. It's in the FAQ, and then there's also a new section on the website for resources, and there's a sort of CEQA compliance resource section where you can find more information about those categorical exemptions, other statutes and guidelines, and then some sample CEQA projects. And there was a question that came into the email inbox about are there any other examples that people could see about what CEQA documentation looks like? So there's a few other notices of exemption in that area where people can look and see what that actually looks like.
Great, thank you, Amy. And we've got a few raised hands. I'm going to go to, we've got Pip Marquez de la Plata. I'm going to allow you to go ahead and talk. Can you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I think it might have been answered, but I'm representing Friends of Rio Neto, and there's multiple landowners, including the county of Sonoma, in Rio Neto, where we're doing a project where it's fire mitigation, habitat restoration, but it's primarily removing English ivy and blackberry bushes and all the underlying stuff that isn't really native to Rio Neto. So one is, I'm assuming that could probably follow under the minor alterations to land exemption. I'm assuming. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. And the other is because we're working with all the landowners and everyone is giving us the okay to go ahead. Does it matter that we're a 501c3, but we have multiple landowners that are going to be part of this?
So I've heard about this project because I think you applied for the Conservancy funds too.
Yep.
Maybe you did. Okay, so I did hear about it. I think that the big issue there, and again, please submit your application and let us take a look at it because it sounds important. The problem that I am seeing with the project is its direct link to mitigation of fire risk. I think it's a great project in terms of ecosystem health on the river. So that I think that is going to be an obstacle, and we'll see when we get your application if there are other aspects to it. My understanding is that the nonprofit the nonprofit is the entity, and it can apply for whatever group of landowners are included in the plan.
Right.
So I don't really see that as being an obstacle.
And the first point you were making, you don't think that this is fire mitigation?
I have to see the plan. Pip.
Okay.
That's something I was talking with the Conservancy about. They've seen it. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
But so please submit it and we'll take a look.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we've got someone else, Saber Smith. Go ahead. And you can unmute. Saber Smith. Okay. All right. Not hearing from them. Samuel Cox, go ahead.
Yes, somewhere I thought I had seen the information that said that categorically HOAs, California HOAs are eligible. Is that correct?
So we've been going kind of back and forth on this, to tell you the truth. We do have one of our attorney county counsel, Corey O'Donnell, here. The issue is it an entity, a legal entity? I don't know, Corey, do you want to respond to that? What your sort of take is on that?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Corey O'Donnell from the County Counsel's Office. The big criteria is that it's a legal entity that could actually sign an agreement. So to the extent that your HOA is formed and is a legal entity in the state of California, that would qualify as an applicant.
Okay, so we're governed by Sterling Davis. So I assume that would meet that description.
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. very
Again,
much.
it would be, there's a question on the application that you list your organization and what your capacity is. And you would just want to include all the information about your association there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Amy, are there any other emails coming into the email inbox?
Yes, actually, there was one that just came in. Let me pull it up. They're wondering about would fencing infrastructure be eligible for funding if they wanted to do prescribed grazing as a vegetation management tool?
Yeah, I think it would be acceptable because it's necessary for the project. I mean, if it's linked clearly to the project. Ask my fellow panelists, but my impression is that it would definitely qualify under the criteria. The eligible project cost, just so you know, is on page 4 of 9 of the main request for vegetation proposal form. So purchase of equipment that's not an integral part of the project is not included, but it sounds like this would be an integral. If you don't have fencing, you can't do grazing. And I like the idea that it would be there for multiple years. So personally, I think it would be included.
All right, thank you. A question from Jim. I'm part of a community of about 50 residential homes in Guerneville, Pocket Canyon. We have a lot of bay trees and Scotch broom within 100 feet of many homes. I have 2 questions. Would you recommend we apply for the grant as a community? And if yes, what is the best means to show our collective interest in the neighborhood? For instance, petition, signature list, etc. That's the first question. Second one is, with such an application, should the grant refer only the invasive species, or would you recommend we include things like failing redwoods and other fallen trees?
So I can respond to the first one. I mean, again, one of the requirements is that you have a legal entity. So in this case, an RCD, a fire district, a nonprofit, you need to have an entity that can bring this group together so that it can then contract with the county. I mean, it sounds like a very important area. And again, I turn to our fire experts to talk about what's going on in Pocket Canyon that you might know about that these folks could join up with, or if not, who they could contact.
Nothing directly within Pocket Canyon. There is a project that we're beginning working through a process with the Summer Home Park group, but that's up on top of the ridge, not down into Pocket Canyon proper.
So who would they, is there a fire district there? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut somebody off. I was just wondering who you would recommend they reach out to.
So that Pocket Canyon is a unique situation because right now, part of Pocket Canyon, which was under the Russian River Fire Protection District, is now governed under the Sonoma County Fire District. And soon to be about June or July, the remaining part, which is also part of Forestville Fire District, will then be joining in participation with Sonoma County Fire District. So the reach out contact for that specific area is Cindy Foreman from that district also.
Okay, so can we provide that information, Amy, on the resources section, the contact for Cindy and that fire district, the Sonoma Fire District?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And
But
to
it
that,
does sound, for this year, you're probably not gonna have a plan and everything in place, but it sounds like something might be eligible next year.
okay, and to the second question, with such an application, should the grant refer only to the invasive species, or would you recommend we include things like falling redwoods and other fallen trees?
To the fire severity side of the question, I've been speaking to some local community groups about the concerns of the built up vegetation in their communities. And I caution people to be concerned or be afraid of all trees. We really need that resilient ecosystem. If we clear cut an area, if we take a larger percentage of the canopy away from the ecosystem, we create an opportunity for more invasive species to come in and or a heavier maintenance component downstream. I shared with the all the attendees and the panelists a vegetation management program brochure that kind of speaks to the different fuel type treatments that you can do out there. And so as a starting point for your community, the broom, obviously, and as well as the bay trees are a good starting point. So I would start there before you got carried away with a larger operation.
On the redwoods and just the cane, I was wondering, Steve, if you could talk about the county, or Robert, talk about the county chipper program, the availability of the chipper. Application for a chipper could be included for this grant, but I was hoping you could just talk briefly about that. Where could people look for those resources?
So this is Steve. I could speak to the Sonoma County Chipper Program. Our Chipper Program is a countywide program. It's offered to all the citizens of Sonoma County, incorporated or not. The program will be opening back up here May 1st. We're accepting applications starting next Monday. Right now, we've been working on a lot of community-based projects from the start of January all the way up to May 1st. So you have two options. We are open to community-based projects where if there's a community leader, they get together with their neighbors and they identify that they're interested in a community project. We set a date. We set aside so much time for them. We put up strict guidelines as far as informational that they provide back to us. And we come through and we chip all the material according to our guidelines, which is posted on our chipping website, which is accessed through the Sonoma County Permit Sonoma Fire Prevention Division. There's also the other option for individuals of sole properties. They could apply for an application themselves. And we provide up to 2 hours per property, and we will do 2 rounds to each property. So if you apply, let's say right now, it's on a first come, first serve basis. We provide a service to you. We give you up to 2 hours under that first application. And then you could apply again and you fall back into the first come, first serve process. 2 hours of work is generally a pile that's about 2 feet tall, about 4 feet wide, and about 3 to 4 feet tall in height. And that gives about 2 hours of service. It comes with a crew that's completely hired by their county personnel. And we also contract with a couple of other fire districts in the county. And we also contract with some Conservation Corps nonprofits to provide the service throughout the county when we get really busy. But that's the gist of the chipper program. There is some strict guidelines. We do follow those pretty tightly because if they are followed, then we get in and we get the work done very quickly, and then we don't have any problems. And all the chips are left on site. They all are scattered down to a minimum depth of 2 to 3 inches. And it's a great opportunity to get some mulch back on your property.
Great, thank you. And going back to Zippy, you've had your hand raised for quite a while. Go ahead and let's see. Trying to I'm not allowed to talk. It's not going through. If you can possibly type your question into the Q&A, that would be great. Craig Hayes, go ahead.
Unmute.
Craig?
Okay. Yeah, hello, are you there? Great.
Yes.
Hey, could you guys just talk a little bit about what your sort of expected distribution of these funds might be? In other words, I mean, are you looking at doing like a couple of $100,000 projects and then a bunch of, $2,000 projects, or what is your sort of, target or expected, project cost for this round? Thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question. And I have to say, until we get the applications in, I really can't answer the question. The Board of Supervisors indicated in the hearing where they set up this grant, that they really would like to make it available for smaller projects, that those are the ones that sort of slip through the cracks and never get done. And sometimes, those are the most important projects. So I think that there is going to be a real focus on if there are smaller projects in communities throughout the county, particularly in those that are identified as being, highest risk. I think those are going to be pretty strong priority. But we don't have a game plan right now in terms of, are we going to do 2 big projects and 10 small ones? That's not the way it's going to be. It's all going to be based on those criteria that I outlined at the beginning of our workshop here today.
Thank you. And to that on projects, Judy had a question. If you have a large project that you can divide between CAL FIRE and the Vegetation Management Program, can you divide it between CAL FIRE and the Vegetation Management Program?
I can't speak to necessarily the scoring side on the county side, but as far as multiple grant opportunities, because obviously the CAL FIRE fire prevention grant cycle closes May 19th. So if you're able to speak to one side or the other about what you're doing with another grant, it may, if it's increasing the scale of that overall project, that may be beneficial. But we are approximately 2 weeks out from both of those grants coming to a closure. So it would take a heavy lift to be able to articulate how those 2 separate requests are playing off of each other.
Yeah, and another problem is we're evaluating our grants, but we don't know what CAL FIRE is going to do. If the project requires both entities to be working together, there would be no way. I mean, we can, it's just not a great approach, I would say. I would try to, apply to one or the other. I think that would be a better approach.
Can I just interject? Judy sort of clarifies this question down below. She said, regarding my question about dividing a project between CAL FIRE and the Veg Management Program, you indirectly answered that question. And I believe she typed this in before you just answered it. We have a shaded fuel break project spanning Timber Cove to Cazadero, including public Fort Ross Road, Bohan Dillon, and Seaview Road, and 17 miles of private roads where our 3 VFD fire departments are housed. How best to propose this project? We have about 50% landowner approval with an outreach team working to obtain the rest, including a community meeting. So I just thought I would add that context for that question.
Okay. Lisa V, is there a procedure to lobby the county to deal with their acreage adjacent to our neighborhood? The Knoll Heights.
Jane, I think Chief Nichols had a response to that. I think that it's we need to give some kind of a response, because that sounds like quite an incredible project. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, if anyone on the panel is.
Yeah, Judy's been working with us seeking CAL FIRE grants as well. Ultimately, Judy's familiar with the process that in order for CAL FIRE, and I would imagine the county as well, to commit dollars to a project, the area to be treated needs to have landowner permissions before those monies are awarded. Because if there's 50% of the community that's signed off on the project, and the county or the state end up granting dollars based on 100% of the properties participating, and they don't, then that's money that's not used for those projects that could have gone to another grantee that had a project ready to go. So again, it's the marathon. It's looking beyond what's right in front of us and the angst coming into fire season 2021, and doing that heavy lift now and that homework now to get those projects done for either this round or those future projects that this problem is not going to go away.
Okay. So the question from Lisa, is there a procedure to lobby the county to deal with their acreage adjacent to our neighborhood? The Knoll Heights neighborhood hopes to join the Pocket Canyon Ridge proposal. However, some county property would not be included in our proposal.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the county property is or who the county landowner is, but I can tell you, I mean, the county has applied for the conservancy grants and identified key areas. I think we need to, I think that you should engage, I'm thinking with Permit Sonoma or Chief Nichols.
Just to tie in, I believe that the county property that they're referencing is the landfill off of Pocket Canyon there. And so that may be one of those beneficial links in the chain. So as I mentioned earlier, we're working with Summer Home Park in the early stages, Summer Home and Oddfellows up onto the ridge there. And so that would be an example of a project that there's a current project underway, the landfill, and then down into the valley floor, the canyon floor proper. So I will share my email and office number here with the group, and I can get you in touch with our local battalion chief to kind of vet out that proposed project in that area you're thinking about.
Okay, thank you. And from anonymous attendee, is a water tank a structure? This is in regards to an elementary school.
This is Steve. I could speak to a water tank. A water tank is considered a structure by definition out of the building code when it exceeds 5,000 gallons in size.
All right, from Brock. One award criteria is advancement of local workforce development and training. Would this grant support a dedicated proposal to offer advanced education and hands-on training in ecological restoration-based BMPs as part of the workforce training program with a collaborative group of local NGOs who currently have workforce crews?
Well, the thing that's confusing about this is that the board has indicated that we can fund education programs, but separately they funded workforce development out of this pot of money. So I think the best thing to do, Brock, on this is for us to engage. This is something that you and I have talked about. I assume this is Brock Dolman. And I really think it's worth you and I engaging further with the county and determining if this is something that would be eligible or not.
Okay, and a question from Jason. The application does not have a section for this, but I suspect that operations taken under the auspices of Forest Practice Rules and Act would serve as CEQA documentation. Robert, what is the county's position on this? Working with a registered professional foresters, landowners presumably could file exemptions under the THP guidelines or file an NOI for projects within an NTMP. Commercial operations are not required to use FPRs.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jason. I will have to get back to you on that, simply because I do not know off the top of my head how the legal framework of two regulatory programs, CEQA and then the functional equivalent in the Forest Practice Rules will kind of go hand in hand in this process. So it's a great question, very applicable, but I do not have an answer for you right now, but we will get you an answer.
Right, and I'm going to go over to, we've got a couple more raised hands. Astrid Meyer, go ahead and talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is actually Inger Meyer. My daughter's name popped up in the Zoom, but I actually just put this question in the Q&A as well. I just wanted to confirm. I think what I heard you say is that the Wilshire Heights Mutual Water Company or a similar nonprofit can apply for funding for properties that aren't part of that nonprofit, as long as we get their permission. Is that correct?
I am so sorry. Could you repeat that, please? Someone just came walking in right when
Oh,
you were
sure.
asking your question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to confirm. I think what I heard you guys say earlier when you were answering my question is that a nonprofit such as the Wilshire Heights Water Company can request funding for projects that would include properties that aren't actually part of that nonprofit, as long as we get permission from the property owners. But I just wanted to confirm if that was correct or not.
I mean, I just don't know of anything in the criteria that would prevent that from happening. If the nonprofit is in fact a responsible entity and within the plan or all of these properties that are identified that CEQA has been complied with, I would ask Corey, but I don't know of anything that I've seen from the county that would prohibit that.
Okay. Yeah, because we have kind of a situation where, you know, on a one street, you might have houses on one side of the street that are part of this water company, and on the other side they're not. You know, so we're really part of the same neighborhood. So I just no, I mean, I think that would make no sense in my opinion. It makes much more sense to gather together, you know, a defined area where you're really addressing fire risk, and the nonprofit is responsible. I just don't know, Corey, because of it being a water district, if you would disagree with that.
No, I agree with what you said, Carol. I would just, I think you want to make clear in your application the scope of your project, the permissions that you have with respect to the properties that are, you know, that aren't owned by the mutual water company or are out slightly outside, and make it clear that you can cover the whole thing. I mean, I think that the issue and what we want to avoid is the thing that Chief Nichols brought up, that you need to make sure that you're covering your whole project so that we're not in a position. We need to know that you're really ready to go before we can provide the funding, because we don't want to have it, you know, the goal is to get projects done and not have it end up not coming to fruition and then having funds that could have gone to something else. So I guess, you know, my advice to you would be provide whatever documentation that you can along with your application to show that you have the permission to do the work that you're proposing in the entire geographic scope that you're proposing.
Okay, great. That makes sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, and Steve has a question relates to the workforce development goals of the project, the consultant recommendations, and much of the conversation at the board meeting that approved the funding referenced a priority for engaging agencies with youth crews to perform the mitigation work with an eye towards connecting the youth and young adults to career pathways in the veg management and fire mitigation fields, including the program funded at the SRJC out of the same pot. Why is that element not addressed in the RFP or the selection criteria? Any chance to better develop that component?
Yeah, so advancement of local workforce development and training is included as one of the award criteria. So I think, you know, this idea of using local workforce crews, local crews, advancing both, you know, bringing more people in and teaching them, you know, people learning how to do this kind of work. That's clearly a priority of the county that they said. The issue is that this is the veg management funding, this 2 to 4 million. And so that's why when I was responding to Brock, a project that's proposing exclusively and only workforce development with no veg management, I don't think would rank high enough, given I think the competitive process that we're going to see here, if that was the only part of the project that was being proposed.
All right, thanks, Carol. Question from Jan, is only a certified forester adequate to make an application? Also, most community groups do not have funds to hire a consultant. Can the private landowners group provide some funding for this purpose?
I'm not sure I understood that. So there's a variety of applicants that I named earlier and that are on page 1. All of these different entities can apply, from nonprofits to community groups to local fire districts. So it doesn't require a licensed forester. The licensed forester is another entity that's eligible to apply. So I think it's broader. What was it? Was there a second part of that question,
I would
Jane?
just say this is a great question to refer the questioner to the Wildfire FuelMapper kind of step-by-step guide that's there. Also at the Sonoma County Forest Conservation Work Group, sort of a step-by-step based on your project and your situation. So certain more complex plans do, I think in my mind, demand that you have a forester sign off on them, or maybe a forester advise. Simpler projects might not require that level of expertise, but that's really what you need to go through, sort of your goals and what are you proposing to do, and getting some sort of feedback. But we're trying to make as many of those resources as available as possible for free at those sites. And there are also people you can contact within those groups for more input and advice. I don't know if Chief Nichols wants to weigh in on that, or.
Sorry, Lisa, I missed that last part.
Well, I guess the question was whether you always need to have a registered forester to sign off on a project plan. And I was saying that's really a function of the complexity and, how big your project is. There may, but the resources that UC Extension is putting out right now is sort of trying to help you walk through that. But I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on at what point you sort of need a forester.
Sure. So on the state side of the house, and Robert, please jump in there if I'm getting off track here, but on the state side, if the project is in timberland, then it requires a forester, a registered professional forester, to be the person signing off on the CEQA review of the project. If it's an area in brush or grass oak woodland, there's not a forester requirement to that process.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit broader than that. So if your project involves forestry, impacts to forest land, forestry is defined in the Public Resource Code, then you need a licensed forester to oversee that work, develop any potential mitigations. So it's really related to impacts on forested landscapes, which is also defined in state code.
All right. I'm going to go to a raised hand here from Jim. Jim, go ahead and talk.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Hey, first off, I just wanted to thank you guys for doing such a great job with this. It's super educational. I was the person that asked the two-part Pocket Canyon question, and I just wanted to clarify. So since we don't have a governing legal entity and the fire, whatever, like the fire association is kind of fractured between it. Is it possible for us to, like a number of us, to individually apply for small projects? And if that's the case, would there be any benefit to us coordinating how we do that?
Yeah, individuals aren't eligible for the grants because it's public money. There's the whole problem of public money going for private benefit. So it has to be, that's why the different groups who are eligible to apply is listed. But it does sound like there's, I think Chief Nichols talked earlier about some resources for Pocket Canyon neighbors, local fire district. I can't recall exactly what you said, Chief. Repeat that.
Yeah, so I put my email into the chat box so that if you're interested in trying to put together a project, we can look at that. But as Carol indicated, individuals are not normally able to get the grant funds, but you as a community can work together to address the problem in your neighborhood. So there may be an opportunity to tie that into other projects that are underway or being put together out there.
I also, Jim, would encourage you to do a little research with some of your local NGOs. For example, Rebuild North Bay, where I'm a director, will sometimes serve as a fiscal sponsor for a community organization like yours. I don't know if the Fire Safe Council's on tonight. I know sometimes they assist with fiscal sponsorship as well. Also, Inquiring Systems does fiscal sponsorship for groups. So there are groups that part of their mission is to provide fiscal sponsorship for projects. So that might be an opportunity that you'd want to explore.
Great,
And
thank
I
you.
should just clarify, when I say fiscal sponsorship, that means they let you come under the umbrella of their 501c3 nonprofit corporation status. But that also means they are then also responsible to ensure that your group fulfills the goals of the grant, because they then become legally liable for the performance.
Got it. Hey, is there any chance you could put a link in the chat box for where I should go to track that stuff down?
The best link is that resources link
Okay,
that
cool.
I provided earlier.
Okay, cool. I've already copied that. Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
there's a long list in there of groups you could check with.
Okay, cool. Super educational. Thanks, guys.
But the Rebuild North Bay, Lisa, is such a great resource in and of itself, because they have a whole nother funding source. They just got another grant, and they've just been incredible in pulling resources from, all over to our county. So take a look at the Rebuild North Bay, and I'm sure it's pretty obvious on that site. I assume, Lisa, where people can look for the fire resources, veg management, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and for people who joined us late, there for private landowners and individual landowners are eligible, you can apply to the North Bay Forest Improvement Program, which is an experimental program funded by CAL FIRE specifically to meet this need of landowner technical assistance to individual and private landowners. So there's a nice portal very similar to what Ag and Open Space has, where you can go in. So if you just go to Rebuild North Bay or Google North Bay Forest Improvement Program, that also is on my 5th slide, which was part of the presentation. I know will be shared, so that link will be there.
All right, and to another hand that's been raised for a long time, Jeanette, go ahead and. Jeanette, can you? Jeanette, are you able to unmute?
I'm sorry, I pushed the button unintentionally. I would like to say that we're working on the Knoll Heights area and are helpful, find this very helpful, and we'll get it together.
All right, thank you. Okay, and a question from Jeff Peters. How do you plan to prioritize between immediate vegetation management and CWPP preparation, which would allow smarter vegetation management prioritization going forward?
Yeah, so the CWPP for the county is being updated as we speak, and I believe I think Lisa, you've been involved in that, but I hear it's coming out in June of 2021, or I don't know if Jane has. I haven't been involved in it myself, but so currently we're relying on the 2016 version, as well as this new FuelMapper program that Lisa, it's at is it FuelMapper? I'm sorry, Lisa.
WildfireFuelMapper.org. WildfireFuelMapper.org.
Right.
I think the question could apply at 2 scales. So there's a Sonoma County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which is a county-wide plan from 2016 that's in the process of being updated. But many communities have decided that they want to do sort of a higher resolution neighborhood scale CWPP as well. And I think that's super important. And one of the things I think will be important out of all these different resources moving forward is to find resources for that kind of planning. But my understanding is this particular opportunity is really focused on those projects that are ready to go. And I think that the county and others will be working on how do we generate those planning resources needed for your question of, doing a community scale plan, which I really do think is very important to help accelerate this process. So everyone's not trying to do it one by one. And that's part of why we're trying to share those resources with you now, so that you can tap into those.
All right, and just a quick time check, it's 6:25. This is going until 6:30, so I think we'll have time for maybe one or two more questions. And just to let you know, if your questions are not answered tonight, if we can't get to them, they will be posted onto the website, the grant website, and we'll have the answers provided there as well. So, all right. Amy, do we have any other emails in the email inbox?
We do not.
Okay. All right, then let's see. I think this may have been answered through previous questions from Keith. I want to use screen fencing to resist cinders reaching our new home, such as used near driving ranges. Would that kind of fencing be eligible? How about external roof sprinkler systems?
I don't know if Robert's still here. Looks like we're losing.
I'm here.
Oh, are you?
I'm here.
Well, I think that would be in your domain, the sort of permit Sonoma world. What is your?
Okay, so what was screen fencing to resist cinders reaching our new home? That sounds like a home hardening type project. Carol, is home hardening an eligible project available for funding?
Well, it's not eligible for private individuals. So I think we may have answered it through previous questions. And it sounds like the way the question was phrased was that it was for an individual home.
Well, I also think the emphasis on vegetation management, the home hardening might fall into a different category. I'm not sure it's on the list of project activities.
Yeah, I mean, saying that there's a number of bills in Sacramento, there is going to be funding for home hardening. The county has a grant in right now that they're anticipating hearing from. That's a FEMA grant that's going to definitely, I believe, have funding for home hardening. So I do think that, again, looking at the resources that Lisa provided will help you with your goal there.
Okay, and a question from anonymous attendee. Are indirect costs allowed in the requests?
So on the form, it lists that on page, this is page 4 of the initial, which is the larger document, the first document as you go into the website. So it lists costs that are included and costs that are eligible, it lists, and then it lists costs that are not eligible. So I would refer you to that, take a look, and I think that's really clear. I'm not sure what kind of cost you're referring to, but anything that's directly related to the project is generally included.
Okay, and Dean asks, is there a match requirement? Please describe. And just to clarify, no, there is no match requirement for this grant. Dave asks, can you please define shovel ready?
Yeah, we've been talking about that throughout the workshop today. I don't know if Robert is still here and would like to just sort of reiterate the meaning of that from a CEQA perspective.
Yeah, I would say from a CEQA perspective, a shovel-ready project is one that has either done all of the studies and pre-planning efforts necessary if it is not exempt. And then if it is exempt, there is a good chance that it could be considered a shovel-ready project. So I think the quicker you can get through the CEQA process, any additional permitting, any of that pre-planning kind of work that has to be done, the sooner that can be done or is done, then the closer you are to being shovel-ready, if that's helpful.
All right. Well, we are at time, and I want to say that lots of really great questions. There are several others we have not had time. So again, those will be posted up on the website. The slide that's up here shows the link to the website for the grant. On that, you can find all the guidelines, the documents that you need to download and complete, attachments B, C, and D that are required for the grant submission. Resource links for the grant. We heard about a lot of them tonight as well, and as well as the questions and answers. And I want to thank all of the panelists tonight for your expertise, and the public for all of your great questions, and looking forward to all of these fabulous grant submissions that we were getting a little bit of an inkling about. Anything else from the panelists?
I just want on behalf of Ag and Open Space, thank you all so much for attending. And again, thank you all for caring about your county, for your community, and helping us to make it through this fire season and into the future in a much more sustainable way. So we'll really look forward to your applications. And again, please go ahead and submit. You know, even if you think it's not going to make it this round, we're going to be in touch with you. We're going to help you figure out how to get your project moving forward.